It's question and answer time, specifically where I take the questions you've asked me about hydronic diesel heating in particular, and we sit down and we answer them. So, Quomer Husson 8176 asked me, do you think this could replace a gas boiler and run the central heating slash rad underfloor in a residential setup? Can the thermostat be set to switch on and off at, say, 65 degrees? And would this fuel be a mixture of diesel and waste oil? A lot of questions there. First thing is, no. The short answer is no. Unless you have a very small space or a tiny house, I would not use this particular diesel hydronic heater for your home. Even though they say it is 30 kilowatt, it's actually, through our testing, I'll put a video link above, it only tested to 33% efficiency, meaning that you're only getting an output of about 9.9 kilowatts max. That's after you do some work to it to make it more efficient. You're only getting about 9 kilowatts. So that equals around 34,000 BTU per hour. Okay, that's the output of this unit per hour at max in BTUs. Now, the next question is, how big of a space are you trying to heat and how much heat loss? Like, is it really well insulated? So if your home is any bigger than say a full-size motor coach or like a school bus, I would say no. You could try to heat it with this, but I do not think it would be a cost-effective solution long-term. I believe your fuel costs would be very high. So as a general guide for hydronic heating, you want between 30 and 50 BTUs per square foot. Now that also depends on climate and your insulation, how good your insulation is. So if you lived in a warm climate, say Arizona, and you're just trying to keep your cabin warm in the winters there, you may need only 20 or 35 BTUs per square foot. If you lived in, say, Wyoming or Canada, where it's frigid cold, you're going to need more. So I do not think the output of this is enough for, say, like a mobile home, a big trailer, a double wide or something like that, or anything bigger than that. It's not applicable. The bus is only 320 square feet max that I'm actually trying to heat. So that's why I think I can do it by really insulating it well. I can do it with about 9 kilowatts of output, about 24,000 BTU. Because if you take 320 and you multiply that times 50, you end up with 16,000 BTU. So that's 50 BTU per square foot. I always err on the high side because the bus is not going to be what you would call well insulated compared to a modern structure that you can have the walls be 6 inches thick and really well insulated. The bus is going to be not. So yeah. So the first answer is no. I wouldn't use this. I would not use this to heat a home, maybe a small cabin. The next thing is, can you use a thermostat with these? And the answer is yes. The simpler heaters, this 30 kilowatt, and I did a review of a 10 kilowatt. Let me grab it. Actually, I believe they called this one a 15 kilowatt. I'll put a link to the video up above. These have no controllers. There's no computer controlled, so they're very, very simple, just on and off. So what you can do is you can take the on-off switch. It's just a circuit that's closed or open. You could buy a very cheap thermostat off of Amazon, a little 12-volt thermostat, and close that circuit. Take the switch off, wire in your thermostat, and close the circuit when you wanted to close it. So you could set your on point to whatever you wanted it to be. And that's how I had this in my ambulance build. It was I actually had a couple of thermostats. The top thermostat came with the diesel-fired hydronic heater, and I sort of used that just to monitor its progress. The second thermostat was connected to some fans, which turned fans on a water-to-air heat exchanger to heat the air in the room. And the third thermostat turned on and off the actual hydronic unit when I wanted it. Through my research and all my testing, initially I was very fond of these simpler heaters that had very little computer control, because I felt, hey, it's just on and off, it's reliable, it's serviceable, there's little to go wrong. There's a downside though. When you get into the more advanced hydronic heaters, let me grab one of those. Like this HLN Aquano 10K, this is computer controlled, and it automatically adjusts its fuel ratio and burn chamber temperature for altitude. That's big. Now, while I have not done long runtime tests with these different heaters, if you read comments about a lot of people have about these diesel heaters in general, both the air heaters and the hydronic heaters, if the computer doesn't automatically monitor your air fuel ratio, you can build up soot really bad. The burn chamber will become fouled. It's a maintenance nightmare. People that rely on these, both air and hydronic diesel heaters, are cleaning them out 2-3 times a year. With the HLN Aquano line and the HLN line being computer controlled with multiple sensors on the water jackets and the burn chambers, plus automatic altitude adjustment for your air fuel ratio, that is less of a problem, if not a problem at all. I have not done extended testing. When I get the bus up and running and the interior is good to go, I will be doing long-term winter tests with various heaters, and I will relay my results to you, like a full winter with the HLN Aquano 10K. How did it do? You know, what kind of maintenance? I'll take the burn chamber apart after a full winter, and we'll look at that. So computer control from a reputable company like HLN that has a dealer network that you can get parts for and warranty and stuff, I recommend it. If you buy one from AliExpress, you can't guarantee you can get parts, and you can't guarantee service. That's why I'm such a big, I like HLN. I've almost tested every single heater they manufacture. I'm getting ready to finish the line out. I've been very pleased with everything they've sent me for testing. And the last thing is, would you run this with a mixture of diesel fuel and waste oil? That's hard to answer. I've seen videos online of people who have done that successfully. If you are willing to deal with soot buildup, if you're willing to clean your system out maybe a couple times a year, yeah, I would go with a basic on-off unit, not computer controlled, and run my waste fuel oil and diesel mixture. I don't know what ratios would yield you results. You would actually have to do some testing to see how much waste fuel oil or waste oil you can put in your mix before you start to foul and really mess things up. I don't know if the juice is worth a squeeze, because yeah, you're burning waste fuel and you're saving money, but you may buy yourself a lot of maintenance down the road with you know, soot and choking of the burn chamber. I have limited experience in that arena. I'm not saying we wouldn't try it, but I don't know if I would do it with a computer-controlled unit. I'd be worried that it would ruin it. So that's that. Yeah. Oh, another note. Remember I had that 30 kilowatt, the big monster? Because it's so inefficient, and this HLN is so efficient, they actually output about the same. So it's funny, in a smaller package with more efficiency, you actually get more heat output transferred to your fluid than a much larger heater with less efficiency. So that's, yeah, love these HLN heaters. I received another question via email by a gentleman named Anthony. I'd like to get your opinion on whether or not the Aquano 5K would be adequate output to heat my cabin sleeper. I've been looking into how to operate the HVAC fan, the fan inside the cab, without the key in the accessory position to save battery consumption. Also, which nobody has spoken about, these hydronic heaters, does it restrict the flow of coolant through the engine when the heater is not in use or the engine is being used under load? And he sent me photos of his sleeper, his cab. It's a really cool camper. It's called a Zoom Room Sleeper, and they're made here in Missouri. I'm located in Missouri too, by a guy in Tipton. I like the look of it, for sure. So to answer Anthony's questions, yes. First of all, the Aquano 5K would be a fantastic. This would be a fantastic use case for the heater. It would have plenty of output to preheat the motor and provide you plenty of heat for your cab and your sleeper. It would be more than adequate. And there's a couple options with how you plumb this in. So typically, I don't know about your specific use case, the engine has its own coolant loop in the block and the heads, and then they will have two lines that go out to the heater core. It's a separate line, and also there's a loop connected to the thermostat, so once the engine heats up, the thermostat opens and the coolant runs to the radiator. So you would take the line out and the line back from the engine to the heater core in your dash, and that's where you would tap into. So if you did run this heater in line with your heater core, yes, if you're not using this heater as you drive and you want cab heat, your engine has to pump the warm coolant through this unit, through your heater core. So it would restrict the flow some, but you're not restricting the flow to the engine block itself. You would just be slowing the flow down through the heater core. I would bet it's barely noticeable. The way I would do it is I would put a T, so in each. So take the two lines coming from your engine block, the heater lines, the heater core lines, feeding it and pulling cool fluid from it. I would tee into those, and I would mount this into both of those lines. And you could put a check valve if you wanted to, but I don't think it would be necessary. So that would give you unrestricted flow for your engine to pump coolant through your heater core. You could also, you could use your engine to provide heat. If you're parked, you could turn this on, and it's going to pump warm coolant through your heater core and some through the engine, but it's going to mainly provide cab heat. It's also going to heat your engine, but not as much unless you forced all the coolant to go through this system. And I kind of like that, because think about it. All right, you're parked somewhere and it's super cold, and you're not going to start your truck for 24 or 36 hours, you know. So you turn on your little Aquano 5K and you start heating up the coolant in your loop. Inadvertently, you're going to heat the block up as well, and that's good. Your engine will be warm and ready to start, but also all night while you're sleeping and all the next day until you're ready to leave, you're keeping that engine block warm. It's costing you fuel to keep that warm. So if you could isolate the engine block and only run heat through the cab, that would save you some money, save you some fuel. And then when you're ready, you could send the warm fluid to the engine block. So there's kind of three ways to plumb this. One is to run the coolant directly through this. So there is no T's, and all coolant going to the heater of your truck would have to go through this. That would be the most restrictive flow, be the most direct flow, limited plumbing. It would work. It's not how I would do it. Then you have the T solution, where you're teeing into the feed and return lines of the heater core. That's going to primarily heat up the heater core and heat the block up some, but not as much as the heater core. The third way you could plumb this, and this is by far the most complex, but it's also the most efficient, would be to isolate this system completely. Kind of like what I'm doing on the bus, but on a much smaller scale. There'd be a rather small tank of fluid that this would heat up, and you'd have a plate heat exchanger, kind of like this one. This is a much bigger one than you would need. But you'd have a plate heat exchanger connected to your engine. So this side would be the coolant loop for your engine, and this side would be the coolant loop for the heater. And you'd have a 12-volt pump so that you could decide when you wanted to heat the engine. And for your cab heating, you would buy a small air-to-water exchanger with a fan. You can get them on eBay. They come with little mounts. So when you're not preheating the engine, you're just using this to warm the air in your rig. Or if you ran some PEX in the floor, I don't know what kind of floor your sleeper has, you could warm the floor in your sleeper. Also, you can make hot water with it. So there's a lot of options. The simplest option is just to put the T connectors and use the in-cab fan. I would personally try to power that fan on a separate circuit. I'd find the actual power leads that go to that fan and a way to power it with a house battery and not have to put the whole truck into accessory mode. That wakes all kinds of systems up on the truck. I would just want to power that fan totally separately. And there's ways to go about that. I get a lot of questions as well about whether or not I should be insulating my bucket and insulating the hoses and insulating everything when I'm doing my testing. And you're all correct. If I did insulate everything, these tests would be more efficient because I'd be losing less heat to the atmosphere of my shop. But because I have not insulated any of the buckets that I've used, and it's all the same bucket through all these tests, I've tried to keep the parameters as close as I could keep them for these tests. Now, while this is not a laboratory, I'm not controlling the air temperature. Some tests have taken place in the winter, some have taken place in the summer. So yes, there has been some differences in these tests. I honestly don't think that small difference makes a large enough difference to foul the results of the test. I still feel like we can gain useful information about how efficient a heater is in its operation and fuel consumption with the testing procedures that I've built so far. If we want to get really, really accurate down to the 10th of a percent, or really, really down there, yeah, we could put the fluid in a sealed cooler. We could insulate the hoses. We could chill the room down to exactly 70 degrees Fahrenheit exactly every single time and start the test. We could try to do that. But there's so many variables in these units about how they ramp. I know these HLN computer-controlled units, they have kind of like a bell curve in their output. So they'll ramp up to max, and then as they approach their set point, they will start to ramp down. And these simpler ones don't do that. So there's just so many variables. I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze for that. I don't think it would make much of a difference because everyone's setup is going to be different. But I can tell you this much. When I do install one of these permanently on the bus, all the hoses will be insulated. The heat exchangers will be insulated. The actual fluid storage tank will be heavily insulated. I'm called a heat battery. So that does make a difference. And for long-term installation, yes, we will be doing that. I've really enjoyed getting all these questions and feedback about my test. I'm glad it's helping you. If you found my tests and reviews helpful, consider becoming a channel member. I just recently launched membership, multiple tiers with different access. You get early videos, you get behind the scenes stuff. I'm going to start going live for members only. Yeah, it's a way to allow me to afford to do this in my spare time and keep the tests coming, in a way for us to interact on a more serious level. I thought about putting a tier in there that project help. probably a pretty high tier, but if you want to brainstorm projects with me, pick my brain and I can help. I'm not an expert at everything, but I've been down the road before when it comes to converting and hydronics and solar and Tesla batteries and stuff like that. You can look at that tier. We'll figure out a way to work together on a project. All right. Hope this helped. I'm Jason. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see you in the next one.